Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm here today with Gresham Harkless, who is a writer. He has a podcast. He runs a website design studio and all sorts of everything digital and multimedia. Gresham, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks very much for having me on the show.
So, Gresham, first, why don't you start by giving us an overview of your business? You have quite a few different activities going on. Why don't you give us an overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a digital marketing company called Blue 16 Media, and we focus on web design and SEO primarily to help out business owners as far as getting their name out there. And I like to say, if you're a Wayne Gretzky fan, skate to where the puck's going to be. So figure out where people are searching and try to be there with your content and your information in your website. And core to that is my entire marketing philosophy, which is you are a media company. So the idea is, no matter what business you're in, the idea is you want to basically be your own USA Today or your Washington Post for your target market. You figure out exactly what they're looking for, what your goals are, and what is success look like for you, and you basically create content around there. So my media company is CB Nation, and under that are blogs, podcasts, and video content, all to help the people that I try to connect with most, which are those entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners to succeed. So I often use this equation where I say visibility plus resources equals success. And that's kind of like what we do at the core, is to try to help that success happen by interviewing and showcasing entrepreneurs and business owners, and also hopefully providing them some resources to help them level up as well.
So you're really practicing what you preach here, building your own visibility. Tell us about some of the ways that you are building visibility, and maybe start with one. You use the website Harrow, or Help a Reporter Out, often to kind of source quotes for your stories. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the core of what we try to do again is about visibility, and I always said I wanted to try to create a platform that we can have experts that are the experts at what it is that they do, showcase that in many different ways. So we use Harrow, Help a Reporter Out, to basically find a lot of those people that are the experts at whatever question we might have. So we have usually three or so, three if not more, questions that we usually have going out each week that answers any specific kind of business questions. So that could be everything from how to use your podcast for your business, or how to use Instagram for your business, or how did you incorporate your business, or what are you doing during this latest economic downturn differently? How did you pivot? So some of those questions that are burning questions that entrepreneurs and business owners have, rather than me write for 1,000 words about what I think, I think the best way in doing that is to kind of have a conversation with people at different size businesses, different stages, be able to kind of give that insight. And Harrow is a great way for us to be able to kind of delve, or be able to get and kind of synthesize a lot of that information that we're getting from different sources, so that at the end of the day, the person that's reading and looking at the post can say, okay, I have these actionable items by which I can use to leverage Instagram or use my podcast, or know how to pivot in my business itself. And hopefully we try to help business owners succeed in that way.
Now, I have signed up with Harrow as more as a source on the source side, and I occasionally will respond to those. And I've been quoted a few times, based on connecting with writers via Harrow. Tell us about the process for using it as a writer or reporter. How much does it cost to get access to that? And then how does it work to send out your question? And like how many responses do you typically get? Tell us a little bit about your process of using Harrow from the writer side.
Yeah, funny enough, I think the very first time that I used Harrow, it wasn't from the writer standpoint. I was like, this is a really phenomenal idea, because you're basically bringing two groups of people together to be able to help, get information out there. And for a lot of journalists, it's been absolutely huge, because the best way to find experts is to go through a site like Harrow to be able to find really valuable potential comments and quotations that you can use for your post. For me, the biggest thing about Harrow, when I initially signed up, when I first started the blog, I actually couldn't even use Harrow. And that's because there's something called an Alexa ranking. And Alexa ranking is basically like a ranking score for your site. So when you first start a site, you won't have a high Alexa ranking. You actually have to build it up. So the reason I bring that up is because a lot of times when people are trying to submit to sites through Harrow, they have a certain reputation automatically by being able to use Harrow that the kind of Joe Smo that may have just started a blog yesterday probably doesn't have. So you automatically know you're kind of reaching a certain, high level of site. And then from there, what we usually do is we plan in advance. So we typically have most of our roundup posts kind of figured out for their entire year. So Mercy, who's also on our team, does a great job of being able to submit and figure out in advance what exact questions we're going to be asking based on our current theme each month. And what we do is we don't have to pay anything. You basically just set up an account. You submit your question through Harrow, and then it goes and is blasted out via email to all the people that want to submit to that specific response. And I believe it goes out at least 3 times a day. It might be a little bit more. And if you go to their Twitter, they have a little bit more deadline specific of inquiries that reporters might have. So from a publisher standpoint, basically, if I have something that needs to go out later on today, for example, I will submit it through Harrow, but I'll also forward it to them so that they can tweet it out to the people that are on Twitter as well too, to let you know, hey, this is the end of the day kind of ask. But one of the things that I found that a lot of reporters don't do is just usually what they're trying to do, success for them is essentially having a post and submitting and writing that article and then getting that done. What they don't do is usually go back and let people know that, hey, you have been selected or you haven't been selected. And me having used Harrow on the submitter side, I found, and I would Google my name and found that I've been featured in this post or that post, but no one ever told me. So one of the things that we try to do in order to hopefully build a community, but also build relationships with people, is to let people know whether they were selected or they weren't selected, that, hey, this post went live. So you're not constantly having to search or have, Google alerts for your name to figure out whether or not you were chosen.
Yeah. And that's good for you as well, because those people may post that on Twitter or LinkedIn or social media, like, hey, I was quoted on this blog post, and it helps drive more readership to your site.
Yeah, absolutely. It creates a great win-win opportunity, I think.
So for people who are responding to these, you've fielded now so many responses. What are some tips that you have for responders of how to, stand out a little bit more or be more likely to get quoted?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I usually say is we have, usually after we have kind of a list of things that are criteria that we usually go through to determine what are really great submissions. And of course, the biggest thing is, are you answering the question? Usually we have a very specific thing that we're asking for, and sometimes we'll get kind of pitches on things that are not even related to what we're asking for at that time. And granted, there's a time and place for everything, but I think understanding that a lot of times the journalists or the people that are creating this piece of content have a deadline. We're trying to stay really focused on what we're trying to accomplish, and answering the question is as simple as it sounds, is something that's often not done nearly enough. And I think one of the things that I learned in my networking world is that everybody's listening to the same station, and that station is WIIFM, which stands for What's in It for Me. When you are pitching and submitting a potential publication, the biggest thing that you want to try to keep in mind is how can you help that publication advance information to their readership? How can you provide value for the people that are potentially going to be listening and reading? We all have really great and phenomenal things and great stories, but you really want to frame it in a way so that it creates that win-win-win opportunity that I mentioned before. I think not enough people really do that. A lot of times you can tell people will just like copy and paste a message in, but they're not really crafting it specifically for the person. And for us, because one of the questions you did ask was just how many submissions do we get? We will get hundreds of submissions for some of the questions that we ask. Because of that, it makes it really difficult to kind of field the questions when they're coming in from LinkedIn or Facebook or you just get them everywhere. So I would say that's another big thing that a lot of people don't do as well too, is really to be able to say, hey, this is coming in from Harrow. We submitted it through Harrow to hopefully allow that opportunity for us to be able to kind of organize and be able to understand exactly this is where it's coming from. But outside of that, I mean, we want to make sure that people have a good reach. So that's one of the criteria that we look at as well too. And also the thing that again is probably overlooked is the quality of the answer. Are you just trying to get it in fast? So you're just going to send, hey, I have a really good answer to this, please contact me. Again, that's another thing that, we as publishers have to do an extra step, and you really want to try to make it easier for the person that's asking the question. So having a valuable, if we're asking for a paragraph response, it's really great to have that because it makes it so much easier for us.
Sure. So answer the question, give a quality answer. You said if the person has reach, what does that mean? You're looking also at how well known is the responder or what their social media reach is. Explain that to me a little bit.
Great question. Yes. So we're also looking to see what a person's reach is. And it's not always if a person sends us a sentence and they have 1 million followers on Instagram or Facebook, that's not necessarily going to be somebody we're going to choose. So it's not completely a hard, fast science. But we really do look into that because, of course, we want to make sure that person also, as we kind of talked about in the beginning, practice what they preach. Maybe they are successful, and that's one of the metrics that can potentially show that. It's not the only one, but it's something that we do take into account. But it's one of the 5 or 6 criteria that we kind of look at.
Yeah. So do you ask people to tell you what their Twitter and LinkedIn is, and then you go check it out, or should people proactively say, hey, I have this many LinkedIn followers and this many Twitter and this many on Facebook, and these are the places I'll post it to let you know proactively that this is how they're going to share the article?
I think that it is something that's important, but I wouldn't say for us it takes precedent over the value of the question. So we usually do a good amount of, I call it cyber stalking, or journalist abilities to really look and kind of see who the person is and what exactly their reach might be. So it's something that people do pitch and they do say it. But I wouldn't say that I won't say it has no impact, but really the value of the content is probably the biggest thing. And then we'll look and see, and kind of looking for consistency more than anything else, because sometimes we'll hear things that don't always align with what we see online.
Yeah. What do you do with the contact info and so forth and the content beyond just that article? Do you maintain sort of a database of all the responses that you get and their contact info so that you can, follow up with good sources on other stories? I'm curious what you're doing, just beyond that one blog post, if you are trying to just store that somehow.
Yeah, so we have it to some degree stored. We haven't exactly created a full all out database. We do have sources of people that we do kind of know that we can reach out to, especially PR agencies as well too. But it is something that we definitely could, work on, where we had originally, and this might be a little further down the line, is kind of have somewhat of a council where we have certain experts on certain topics that we'll kind of reach out to. So that we know kind of these are the go-to, and a lot of PR agencies sometimes have really great stories to make that a little bit more automated for us. But it just kind of depends for us, but that's not something we have in place now, but it is something that we know that we can build upon.
All right. Now, tell me about your podcast a bit. People often ask me, well, is podcast good for business development, worth the effort? Do you find that you've been able to connect and build relationships with folks that eventually turn into clients, or tell me a bit about how you think about the value for you of doing the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most underutilized ways that people can use podcasts and leverage podcasts is, to me, as an extension, like a marketing channel of your business. And I talked about the You Are a Media Company. I often look at a lot of these things, and by these things I mean like social media, podcasts, blogs, as I call them ingredients, just like you're going to the grocery store and you figure out what you're going to make and you figure out what ingredients are going to be essential to what you're trying to do. So this ingredient, podcasting specifically, I think is a really great way to build relationships and build connections. I think more than most other ways. With video, sometimes you have people that don't want to be on video. So sometimes you have to bridge that gap. But with podcasting, I think if you're able to sit down and have a conversation and guide somebody through, I think it provides a really great opportunity to do that. So for me, that's what I consider a success, is really being able to kind of build connections and relationships. But I have also, through those connections and relationships as well, been able to develop strategic partnerships and clients as well too. Because one of the things we'll do for the podcast is, right in the line with Blue 16 Media, is we'll have a website audit for everybody that's on the show as well too. So it kind of feeds into what we are also doing from that standpoint. So at the very least, maybe somebody does become a client, or at least they have a better idea of where exactly their website is, and they know an agency to kind of touch base with based off of that. And then one other kind of really big thing that I think people kind of forget about with podcasts is it's definitely a reputation building tool. So having the opportunity to have a podcast, and especially if you are going to either be the person that's inviting the experts on, or even if you have a solo podcast, give you that opportunity to kind of drill down deeper into the expertise that you have. It provides you a media opportunity to really build your own, that allows you to showcase that experience and showcase that in many different ways on many different episodes. So I think obviously sometimes a lot of people start podcasts in order to get advertisers, and I think there's definitely a time and place for that. But I believe the most strategic way is through relationship building, and really as an ingredient to your overall marketing recipe.
Tell me a bit about your web design firm, about Studio 16.
Yes, so we basically are I say a digital marketing company. We do web design, but in web design we try to do basically from a marketing standpoint. It's even drilling down a little bit deeper from an SEO perspective. And I mentioned skating to where the puck is, for people that might be Wayne Gretzky fans, and the whole idea is to really get into who your target market is. What exactly they might be communicating about, or conversations they're having and even searching for, and really trying to build everything related to how exactly that interaction is happening or potentially will happen in the future. And I think when we're talking about any aspect of digital marketing, really, but definitely the designing of the website, so many times a lot of people look to have something that looks pretty, that isn't really a kind of tool by which you can use to drive home whatever your goal might be. A lot of times that's customers. Sometimes it could be more podcast experiences or visibility. But I think so many times we just have a website to have a website because we hear that we should, but not using it very strategically to be able to reach that goal. So what we try to do is have that website be an extension of what exactly you're doing and hoping to define as success in your business and organization.
All right. Walk me through the process that you follow. I imagine that you have some kind of typical stages that you'll go through in designing a website with a client, or maybe they already have an existing, more homemade website that they did on, Squarespace or Wix or something, and you're upgrading it. Walk me through the process.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the process really starts offline. And I think it's really having, just like if you were to go to the doctor to get an idea of where exactly your vitals are, you really want to do that, from a digital marketing perspective. So we really try to have a conversation in the very beginning. A lot of that determines, even if we're the best fit, but also too determines like where exactly you're at and where potentially if you have already had a website or already had a digital marketing experience, where exactly that maybe, fell, below par or where you wanted it to be, or less than exceptional, honestly. Having that conversation, really understanding who your target market is, what success looks like. Are you building a website so that you can drive home, more opportunities? Do you want people to come? If you had a storefront, maybe go to your storefront. Are you potentially starting an e-commerce site and you want to drive more people to, sell more widgets from your site? Or are you just hoping to build your brand and you want to be the expert at whatever it is that you do? Really understanding what that is so important. And I don't think enough entrepreneurs and business owners kind of do the work in the very beginning before jumping into a website or jumping into different social media channels or even thinking about SEO. So I try to spend the most time really drilling down on that. Sometimes we work with clients that do or have already worked with like kind of brand strategists, and they have that pretty much laid out in a bow. But more times than not, I think a lot of people haven't really done a lot of that exercise in the beginning. And an extension of your target market that I focus on is I try to really paint a picture of who exactly you're targeting. And that's an avatar. That's essentially saying my ideal client is Rick. He's 32 years old. He's been in business for 5 years. He has 2.5 kids. He owns his home. He likes to spend his Sundays watching football. So really understanding on a very specific level who exactly you're targeting. You can have more than that. And the reason, again, that is so important is because what you're doing with your website, what you're doing with your digital marketing is all communicating to that person. And if you don't have an idea of who that person is, you're kind of shooting in the dark. And there's a time and place for that. But really, when you want to invest and really start to see things go to another level, you really have that kind of cleared away as much as possible. So we try to ask a lot of those questions and get an idea of where maybe there are some gaps or some opportunities. And we can run an analysis to see exactly from behind the scenes, especially for a website, where exactly those gaps might fall. So not to get too technical, but if your title tag and your meta description and basically the way that you translate your website for search engines is not up to par, we can tell that. We can tell some of the things that may be not being done as well. So we have kind of a plan of action if that is something that is of importance to the person that we're talking to. But again, a lot of that happens in the very beginning. And so we have an idea or a playbook by which we're going to execute on the site. So after that, we usually start work with the client. We'll put up typically a test site. On that test site, it allows us to work while the current site is still up. So we're able to go through and get all the information that we need in the very beginning. And we start to work on the different aspects of the website. And we usually go through 3 rounds of changes. And then at the end of the entire process, we're communicating directly through a tool we use called Basecamp, so that we have everything all in this kind of electronic file folder, and we're communicating with the client and they can see all the progress on the site itself. And then we can, at the end of the final approval, be able to transfer the site and have it go to the live site.
Fantastic. With all the work that you've done in the podcast and the blog, what are some of your favorite tips that you've learned that have been either surprising or really valuable to you that you've learned from having all these guests and doing all these blog posts?
I'll tell you, so on my podcast, I have kind of set questions that I go through. One of the questions that I have is called a CEO hack. And the hack can be an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but that is something that makes you more effective and efficient. Hands down, probably the most consistent one that I've had, especially from high achievers, have been the morning routine. And it's made me also continue to pay attention to my morning routine on a consistent basis. And the reason for it is because I've heard the quote, and I'm sure you probably heard the quote as well too, where in order to win the day, you have to win the morning. And that's something that I have heard consistently. And I've lucked out by hearing, from different people that have, different ways that they run their business, like different nuances of what they do for their podcast. So like I had, for example, a DJ on my show, and she talked about how she has a kind of a win the day playlist that she plays. So, and I started to incorporate that because so many times you forget how important music can be to what it is and how exactly you set your day. So just having all of those different nuances in place, and meditating and working out and doing all of those things have been so important. But it always, for me, has gone back to that hack of really winning the morning. And that's probably been the absolute, biggest thing that I think has, kind of transformed everything that I try to do. And I think that's probably been one of the more valuable hacks that I've gotten during the show. But there's loads of information. I mean, I've done about 800 episodes or so. So there's
What?
a tremendous amount
800
of,
episodes?
yes, yes, of the daily one. So I've done a tremendous amount, and I've learned so much from everybody being on the show.
That is amazing. 800 episodes. Whoa. What's your morning routine?
So I usually, so I'm in Eastern time, so I wake up usually at about 6 o'clock. And then from there, I usually do some type of meditation. So part of that meditation is gratitude, just, being thankful for one, waking up and just getting an opportunity to be thankful for, different things that are around me. A lot of times I think the practice, and I've never been a big meditation person. I didn't really know how to do it. But I think just being present to where you are has been so huge. And I think that in that gratitude, it helps me to be present for the bed that I'm laying in, for, the air conditioning that's, buzzing above me. So all those little small things that you forget about, I think it helps to bring more of that out when you're being aware of that. So really try to really focus on that aspect in the beginning. And then from there, I usually do try to do some type of movement. So that can be everything from squats to push-up jack burpees. So I do some of those just to kind of get your blood rushing and get you on a higher elevation, so to speak, and you're able to kind of operate better from there. I do, all the brushing, the washing, and all those things, and then I take my dog out. So I take my dog out usually to the dog park, and that's usually where I start listening while I'm out with her. If not walking to the dog park, I'm actually listening to that Win the Day kind of playlist that I have going on. So I'm always listening to that and putting a lot of positive things into my mind, trying to get my mindset right. And then I usually come back. I do and drink my shake typically in the morning. And then I journal for a little bit, and I get started on the day usually by 8 or so. And one other kind of quick thing too is that I usually end my day with the gratitude journal. So I have a gratitude journal that I use, and I'll write in that, and it asks me 3 things that I did and I'm appreciative of that day. But I also try to plan the next day. So really the biggest thing that I think I've heard as well too is that in order to win the day, sometimes you start yesterday, and really doing that at the end of the day gives you that forward momentum towards doing that.
What's been the impact on you of the gratitude journal?
It's been huge. I'm a really high achiever, I guess you can say, and I'm really driven towards the next thing. I almost don't do a really good job of enjoying the wins. I won't say I don't seek out wins. I obviously want to win, but I always like the challenge and to try to reach for the next thing. So the gratitude journal, first of all, I'm a big reader and writer. So that's always important to me. The prompts are phenomenal. But I think those 3 wins that you have every day has been huge, because I think it has allowed me to be a lot more aware of the things that are going well, that sometimes we skip over even when things are not going as well as we hope. And I think that that's how you create that energy and that momentum towards having more of that, by really being appreciative of the things that we sometimes take for granted. And I think overall, I've had some really great, prompts that I've read and that I've responded to. But I think overall, just that practice of continually being appreciative of things that are around you that we take for granted has been a tremendous impact for me.
That's a great story. Gresham, for folks that want to follow up and find your sites online, where's the best place for them to go?
Yes, absolutely. So a hub of everything that I have is my website, iamgresh.com, and that's IMGRESH.com. You can literally find links to the podcast, the CEO podcast, the I Am CEO podcast, my blog, and Blue 16 Media as well too. And the biggest thing that, I think is probably of tremendous value is the hacks. And if you check that out, that's at ceohacks.co. And that has all the hacks that I practice, some of the hacks that I've heard about on the show, and hopefully allows an opportunity for everybody to level up.
Fantastic. Well, Gresham, thank you so much for joining today. This was a great discussion. Really enjoyed speaking with you.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much, Will.